The last of the font adjacent properties that we're going to cover for now is font family. Font family is what we use to actually change the font of an element. So you can see some examples here. Just watch this text. That font is changing. Now, I have to warn you up front, changing fonts is maybe not as simple as you might think because it really depends on the fonts that are built into your browser. Until we learn how to install or include custom fonts, which is a separate topic, it's not terribly hard. It's actually very easy. It just takes a separate video. Until we get there, we have to rely on browser fonts or web-safe fonts. These are fonts that we can assume most users will have in their system. And there aren't very many. There really aren't. If we go to this website, I've included the link in the alongside this video in the resources. This shows us some of the most commonly used fonts and how many Windows machines have it versus how many Mac machines have them. So you can see something like Arial. Lots of support on Windows machines and Macs. But then we have other fonts like Franklin Gothic Medium, very common on Windows machines, uncommon on Macs. So if you want to use one of these fonts, and it's the only font that you want to use for a given element, you have to keep in mind that it may not be fully supported, and some of your users will see something different. If I don't have Franklin Gothic Medium on this machine, my text will look different. That doesn't mean the text won't be there. It just won't be the right font that you intended. So the way that we use this is font-family, and then the simplest form is just picking a font. So how about what's Arial, very common across both platforms. How about something like Verdana? Let's try one of those. So let's do it on our H1. Font family, Arial. Watch right here, I'll refresh, and it did change. It's not a huge change, but it did change fonts. Let's also try Verdana. I'm going to refresh, keep your eyes right there, and it changed again. Okay. So that's the simplest option, but generally what you'll see is something called a font stack. And a font stack is basically a list of fonts that you would like to use in order. So here's my first choice, Gill Sans Extra Bold, and then my backup or just a fallback font is actually not a specific font, it's a family, sans serif, any other sans serif font available. So let me show you what I mean. Let's play around with this. Let's pick a font I do not have on my machine. For example, I'm on a Mac. I don't have Perpetua. I'm just trying to see if there's a very obvious one. How about Sego UI? I'm probably butchering that. So if I wanted to use that, Sego UI, I'm pretty sure I don't have that font. And yeah, I don't. It's not showing up here. But I can then provide a backup or my next choice using that comma to indicate this is my first choice, then here's my next choice. How about, sure, Futura, like that, refresh, and that is indeed Futura. And I could continue on, right? I could specify something else like, Arial, which I do have. But that is not going to be displayed. I won't see Arial being used unless I don't have Sego, I don't have Futura, but I do have Arial. So it shouldn't change at all, and it doesn't. Now, I can also provide this backup option, the fallback just to a generic family. And these are the families I can use. If you don't know much about typography, it's okay. I don't really either. But there are different types of fonts. Serif fonts, sans serif fonts, monospace fonts, and then some odder ones like Fantasy. You can see some of the examples here. Basically, your browser will just pick one if you choose Fantasy or Monospace or Serif. Now, this is not a comprehensive list, but these are some of the most commonly used fonts. So if I wanted to, I did Sego and Futura, these would be sans serif fonts. So I could just say pick any backup sans serif, which is probably what I would do, right? You're trying to design your application or design your site with some font in mind. And if it's a serif font and the user who's viewing your site does not have that font, you generally want them just to use some other serif font at the very worst case. So I'm not going to see a difference at all. But if I did something like this instead, font family, just to show you, Fantasy, that's not specifying a particular font. That is a family of font types. And I think this is Papyrus. It's just a lovely font, isn't it? It just picked it for me. Same thing with, if I did monospace, it picked a monospace font. I don't know which one it is, maybe Monaco or something like that. I'm not positive, but one of these here. So that's basically it for now for font family. You just pick the name of the font or multiple fonts in a comma-separated list. This is your highest priority, and then your next highest priority, and then your third, and so on. You can have as many as you want. Typically, usually you have one or two, and then a backup. It's always best to provide a backup, this generic fallback, just a type. And then later on in the course, we'll see how we can include our own custom fonts so that we can guarantee that the user will have, or just about guarantee, that they'll have access to the font we want. Maybe it's some fancy font that most machines don't have. That doesn't mean we can't use it. We just have to take some extra steps. But for now, we're just relying on built-in fonts that most users will have on their system. Okay, so that's font family, and that about wraps up all this tech stuff, at least for now.